If you saw Stranger Things upside down projected onto the Empire State Building, or saw how Westworld's town came to life at South by Southwest, then you're familiar with Giant Spoon's work. The ad agency is known for its innovative campaigns, outside-the-box thinking, and in their own words, stirring shit up. Behind many of these campaigns is Jon Haber, co-founder of Giant Spoon, a longtime agency man who has mastered the skill of pulling creativity from every one of his team members, leading to some of the most talked about advertisements of recent times. Here's how Jon Haber develops innovative ideas. Giant Spoon is known for doing these known for a lot of different creative pursuits with the idea of helping out brands. Most recently are more experiential ones, like the Stranger Things display on this very building, sort of a rift taking place on the side of the Empire State Building. Would you walk us through one of those? What is it like going from having a Netflix, let's say, come to you and say, this is what we want, through the process of getting your teams in place and then executing on a vision that you have and making sure that's a vision that your customers or clients also have?
Stranger Things, and maybe had been off the air for a couple of years. Streaming wars are in high battle mode. This is one of the biggest shows on the platform, and they needed it to come back in a massive way.
Okay.
That's a big, heady business objective. And so when you sort of sit down with a blank piece of paper and say, what are we going to do to give the world that feeling, you kind of have to say, we need to break formats and we need to do something different. So that leads you to a deck of 20 ideas, one of which being this broad thought, which is, let's bring the upside down, the sort of demonic underground world of Stranger Things into the real world and have it burst into our world in a myriad of surprising big ways. And so that becomes the philosophical umbrella of what we want to do. And then you start to think tactically, okay, what are the surprising places we could do this that are going to really be unexpected and break through? And the marquee of that was this building that we're in, the Empire State Building, which, we had been tracking because the building has a great social media presence. They play with the lights. They have a personality. And so it's like, oh, this might actually be a canvas. So then it became projecting on over 100 stories of this building with basically a demon from the Stranger Things upside down bursting out of the walls that everyone in Manhattan could see, at least in one direction in Manhattan. And that felt bigger than life. And then you sort of say, all right, what's the playbook to do that on monuments all over the globe in the same sort of 24-hour period? And then we've achieved our goal of having the marketing be as big as the show should be felt. And that's sort of what led us there.
How do you get people to think big? Yeah. Even if you're the most creative person, you might set your own constraints, or maybe you think the client will never buy this. So how do you get people to think both big and realistically?
Right. That's the dial between the two things is hard, but it's the same thing that gave us the sort of confidence to go start an agency, is sort of harnessing being naive as a superpower. If you've been doing this for a long time, and this is a danger that I have or that our more senior people have who actually have some level of experience now, you go, well, we thought of that 10 years ago and we couldn't do it. Or they'll never do that. Or what, that's not possible. Sometimes that experience is what works against you. And sometimes being so naive that you say, what if we did that? And you don't have, well, we tried to project on the Empire State Building in 2003 and they said, no effing way. But that might prohibit you from calling and saying, what about now? So I think that naivete as a superpower is a critical tool in business, and trying to keep some of that naivete even as you become more senior and more experienced.
So how do you do it?
Maybe a little cognitive dissonance. For me, it's not saying no to ideas that I think are not realistic. We create a culture around, we call them spoon shots, and we'll have a Slack channel for just spoon shots. And it could be things you're not even working on, just who our clients are. Or maybe even if they're not our client, what crazy ideas do you have? Put them in this Slack channel. We'll look at them. But that's a cultural thing of thinking that way.
You might expect this industry to be a world filled with aspiring ad professionals eager to craft the next big marketing stunt. The LinkedIn data shows that those companies are struggling to find the right talent. Demand is high, but the talent pool is small. However, Jon says you don't need to hire a creative to get creative. At Giant Spoon, ideas can come from any team, from writers to strategy. Do you think anyone can be creative? Do you try to get ideas from everyone at the company, or is there a certain group that you're like, you're the creative team, you come up with the ideas?
We really worked hard to break down the walls of who can be creative. I think there are different flavors of creativity. I think, you even want your finance people to be creative within the bounds of the law.
Right.
But that's been part of our model from the beginning, was because we left big agencies where there was a bit of a linear process. And so it was always like, how do we get different types of brains in the room in the right ways to work together and feed off each other, and then have them come apart and let experts and specialists and craftspeople do their craft and then come back together again. And there's this sort of like breathing process, this sort of in and out process that we try to encourage, where we create unexpected collaboration, but don't take anything away from craftspeople who really have put in their 10,000 hours to do what they do.
So we talked about the Netflix example, but I wonder if a better one for this audience might be the GE example. Because Netflix, you had great imagery, you had an exciting story. I mean, there was probably a lot, I would assume there was a lot to work with there. But GE, trying to figure out something creative to do with them, in this case, you ended up buying, I believe, the full run of ads in the New York Times. Like every single ad was a GE ad, right? How do you think about creativity for these kind of old world or maybe not really exciting brands?
I personally actually like those things more.
Really?
Well, there's one thing. In entertainment, you're selling a story.
Right.
The story's already written. Technology companies or industrial companies or things that B2B even, you start to say, what is the story? And you can actually craft the story, and then you can figure out how to bring it out into the world. So there's a broader creative process there where you're actually the storyteller as well as the sort of bringing it to life in the world. So I always think that's interesting. GE's been our client since day one for 10 years. And one of the most recent things was what you mentioned, was as they're splitting into 3 companies, there's a story around focus and the power of focus. And that's why we took over the entire New York Times, to kind of show the power of focus, to take over that. So that becomes the canvas and the message and the story about GE, which is all super interesting. But GE over the years has let us do integrations into the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. We made a shoe, like a sneaker culture shoe, out of the same materials that they used in the first lunar mission, or a sci-fi podcast. All of these things are different canvases, different formats, different ways to tell the story, but it all leads back to GE is one of the most innovative technology companies in the world.
As advertising moves beyond the world of billboards and commercials, the skills needed to do the job have changed along with it. According to our data, the fastest growing skills in the ad industry include events and client relations, which is no surprise. We've all seen firsthand how in-person events have gained traction post-pandemic, with consumers valuing the ability to connect with one another on a whole different level. For business, this means the opportunity to create memorable experiences while marketing their brands. The problem comes when ideas, many times forged in small rooms, get nixed as they move up the management chain or to clients. What the industry needs are people who can make creative ideas accessible to everyone. Do you think everyone is creative or can be creative? And then how do you convince people who maybe control budgets, who maybe aren't as creative or maybe are more cautious, that they should do something that is out of the box?
It's interesting. We've been looking lately at studying creativity and sort of what we call an expansive mindset. And as we've been researching like what expansive thinking is, we came to some data that shows that like we are all creative when we're children, and then it sort of like gets taken out of us for various reasons. And obviously people's brains work differently and some people are more inclined, but I think the creative problem solving is sort of something that's inherent in all of us. And then it's how you focus it, how you nurture it, and what your sort of genetics will drive as well. But I think everyone is creative, but some people suppress it a little bit more than others.
Let's say you're a creative spirit, you have an expansive mindset, you're working in a company, your boss, or maybe the accounting department doesn't necessarily want to run with your ideas. You have different advice for someone working within a company.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. I think it's just about doing things and not being afraid to try to do things. But those early solutions might not even be that out of the box, but they have to be right and they have to work. And then once you do something that's right and that it works, you get more rope. And then you do something maybe a little different, but it works, and you measure it and you have a case for it and you have the data to back it up. And then you go on to the next, and you can keep, again, expanding from there. And I think that is true for us as an agency and our client relationships. And it's true if you work inside of a big or small corporation and you're trying to convince, you're trying to break momentum and legacy and history. You've got to go pitch something, but have the data to back it up and start somewhere.
Here's what stood out to me. You don't have to be in a so-called creative role to be considered a creative. Creativity doesn't just mean art, it means problem solving and innovation. That's why Jon emphasizes expansive thinking, so we can reconnect with our childlike, boundless imagination, where anything seems possible. That's the root of out-of-the-box thinking. Getting to that mindset takes time. Try new things, learn from it. Bounce ideas off of people around you to keep growing your creativity. We dive deeper into expansive thinking and the creative mindset on the This Is Working podcast. In the meantime, tell me, how do you tap into your creativity? Let me know in the comments.